Okay. Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com, All Media Reviews Podcast number 8. Today, this is Friday, January 5th, 2018. And I thought I would talk a little bit about some stuff with the podcast, with the blog and new release. Specifically, I want to talk out the bat about Typhoon and their new album Offerings, which is released on a week from today on January 12th. However, of course, the hipsters already have made it available on NPR to stream, so it's not really weird to talk about an album early. Of course, I pre-ordered it. There were listening parties, per se, that they did a tour of the band Typhoon. I want to say maybe in October or November. I can't remember when that was. They did, I don't know how many, 5, 6, 7, not that many. But they didn't come to Minneapolis, of course, so I wasn't able to attend one of those. I would have liked to. But yeah, this is their first album. Typhoon, just to introduce a little more background with them, they're what I call chamber progressive college rock, or just called chamber rock band from Portland, Oregon. And their name is Typhoon. It represents a lot of what their band encompasses in terms of size. They're a little bit like the Polyphonic Spree. They're like a more progressive version of the Polyphonic Spree, I guess you could say in some ways. Because they have, I don't know, my guess is it's between 18 and 30 members at different times. Kyle Morton, the singer, and he plays a lot of acoustic and other kinds of guitar. I assume he writes a lot of the lyrics. Is the main large one-person representative of the band, but they have all these different musicians that do different things, between drummers, string players like cello and violin, and trumpet, and multiple guitarists, at least one, maybe 2 bass guitarists, and of course, I don't know how many drummers, at least 2 drummers when I saw them live, and then other percussionists, and then they have other singers and everything. So their new album is called Offerings, and it's probably their most ambitious work. I've got to listen to it finally this morning. And while it does include a lot of styles from their previous work, their previous albums, their last album, White Lighter, which came out in 2013, was an awesome record, was one of my top 5 records that year. But I'd say that, first of all, this new album, Offerings, is longer. The last song, Sleep, is 12 minutes and 49 seconds itself. So it's longer, it's more conceptual / ambitious / cinematic, maybe in a way. But I guess I'll read an email I got through the email list that Kyle Morton described this to the person with their label, I think, back in May of 2017. It's a record from the perspective of a mind losing its memory at precisely the same time the world is willfully forgetting its history. The urgent question becomes, without casualty, without structures of meaning, without essential features of rational thought, is there anything that can save us from violence / oblivion? With no past and no future, there is only suffocating, annihilating present, looping on and on ad infinitum. To me, one plausible definition of hell. And the best you can hope for is that somewhere in the void there exists some small irreducible certainty, a fragment, a kernel, something that you may have the good future or fortune? I think he meant fortune, but future to stumble upon before it's all over. You know, a boy / girl meets girl / boy. Everyone dies in botched attempt at neo-pagan sacrificial ritual on a global scale kind of thing. Which is kind of funny because I saw the David Koresh, Branch Davidian cult special on ABC last night. I was thinking about some of this stuff that almost fits what I was watching. Which also reminded me of Porcupine Tree's song, Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth Before It's Recycled, which actually wasn't the Branch Davidian, but it was the Heaven's Gate cult. But anyway, Now getting back to it, this album, yeah, like I said, it's more conceptual than White Lighter or any of their previous records, really. Although they have their sound in general has a lot of cinematic qualities, but there's definitely a lot of segues, a lot of dynamics. Early on, I'd say my favorite track might be the second to last track, Ariadne or Ariadne, Ariadne. A lot of cool piano, like gentle, melancholy piano in that, and the dynamics are great. Unusual is another favorite. It's over 6 minutes long, and it has some twists and turns, and if I'm not mistaken, it has some great vocal harmonies from and vocal parts from, I think it's a female singer, because they have female singers in the band. I don't know, among the 18 to 30 members of the band, I would say maybe at least a quarter, maybe a third of them are female. It's not half women, unfortunately, but not that really should matter much. But the other thing I noticed is the singer kind of reminded me on that song, the other singer, not Kyle Morton, who's singing just lead, reminds me of Jonas Berry from Mew. I wonder if they're Mew fans. It wouldn't surprise me. So, but yeah, I noticed on Rate Your Music, of course, some people didn't like it that much. Some people did, some people didn't in terms of their ratings. They were giving it like 1.5, 2.5 stars. And I could sort of understand maybe why, since it doesn't have like a track after track dynamic, catchy, melodic sense. It's more suited. A lot of the music on this album is suited for the concept, but it's not too overt. It's not melodramatic, really. I think it's definitely a record that I'll listen to more and get more, and more people will want to check out. So, is it the best record I've heard so far in 2017, 2018? Maybe it's not clear cut. If I listen to it more and I feel better about it, I'd say yes. Right now, by default, I might put it number one, but it's sort of, I'm unclear because enough of it was very conceptual. But it's just a long record. It may be almost 70 minutes long, which I don't know if they have any records that are, their other 3 full lengths, I don't think any of them are close to that long. White Lighter was like 40 minutes. So you put it on one cassette tape. So anyway, I wanted to piggyback on this, the fact what Typhoon, after their first record, comes out after 5 years. A lot of people will probably talk about it. I hope more people get into them, especially the progressive rock scene that don't know about them. But I've been meaning to make an entry about the chamber Baroque music, the Baroque rock music that I've gotten into over the last decade or since the year 2000. But I have some other thoughts about that. But for one thing, I wanted to go back to the Typhoon. I read a review. There's already a review up of the new album offerings. Of course, comparing it to, among other bands, Arcade Fire. This is one beef I have. It's like Radiohead. I don't like Arcade Fire. Why don't I like Arcade Fire? Mainly because their singer is, while he's not technically a bad singer, there's nothing special about his voice. And even the female singer sounds a little bit too much like either Blondie or, I think maybe the hipster factor hurts my interest in them. You know, they won the Grammy for The Suburbs and all this crap a few years back and everything. Everyone's praising, Funeral being the greatest album of the new millennium, all this stuff. They're basically Radiohead 2.0 in that sense, is that, they've influenced a lot of bands, but at the same time, I'm not sure a lot of bands that share qualities with them necessarily were influenced by them. They just happened to... Arcade Fire, I guess, uses some string parts once in a while. They don't emphasize it like these chamber bands. And I wouldn't call Arcade Fire highly emphasizing chamber rock. No, they're not even prog, really. They're like the Flaming Lips. I mean, they're a little psychedelic. They use some instrumentation at times, but no. The Cloud Cult do it so much better. So many other bands that do it better than them. And so I'm really tired of the Arcade Fire comparisons, but I guess I don't have a choice. Just like Radiohead. I don't like Radiohead, although I can't deny that they influence a lot of bands I love, like, Muse or Ours or, to an extent, so many bands since then, even Dredge perhaps. Anyway, so to go along with that, talking about this entry I want to make about chamber Baroque rock, or chamber Baroque progressive college rock, or chamber Baroque college rock, one of the 3 or 4, whatever. I'll just kind of say that, I got some time coming up this weekend. I'm going to watch Logan's Run. I've never seen that movie, but And I have 6 entries I'm working on simultaneously, which is weird for the album's calendars. That stuff may get done, but then again, I might decide, fuck it, and I'll do the chamber Baroque entry. So I don't know how many artists are in there, but I was listening to Frank Zappa's Apostrophe album yesterday. While I didn't love all of it, they used chamber instruments in that. And of course, it was like a little mini orchestra, Frank Zappa's band. So the roots of chamber Baroque rock might actually start with something like, other artists too, I suppose. The Beatles. But Frank Zappa kind of may have done it, although he emphasized humor a little more than the instrumentation of those chamber instruments. But of course, he used xylophone pretty uniquely. Otherwise, yes, I'm going to talk about Cloud Cult and Typhoon and Mother Falcon and the Deer Hunter. The Deer Hunter, I would say the early Deer Hunter. The last couple Deer Hunter records, they're not using as many string parts as they have, or horns. They still use them some, but it's not emphasized as much as on Act 1 and Act 2 especially. Who else? The other biggies. The Polyphonic Spree will have to get mentioned. Cloud Cult for sure. Cloud Cult's a big name that people don't also talk about using that stuff. There's some Margot and the Nuclear So-and-Sos, Anathallo, maybe my latest novel. It's gonna, it depends on how specific I'm gonna be, how much emphasis they use of it. There's some others I'm not thinking off the top of my head. But yeah, I've been meaning to make an entry, write an entry, publish an entry that emphasizes this specific aesthetic. I mean, yeah, I Am the Morning. There's a lot of bands that use violin and cello. If you want to just be cello specific. But it's like you have one cellist that's not exactly a chamber of other instruments. It's just one. Stiletto, formal, and grammatics use cello pretty distinctly, but they didn't use a lot of other. They didn't use xylophone, or they didn't use oboe or clarinet or flute or trumpet or sax or trombone necessarily. Even a couple of those extra ones. So that's why it's a little bit more of a stretch if one band uses. Yeah, I mean, of course, Judgment Day distinctly uses cello and violin. They probably would fit, even though they're more post-rock, or I don't know if you call it post-metal, just instrumental. And that's the other thing I've noticed about a lot of these, like Do Make Say Think. A lot of the bands that are, even Anathallo, I think, have used chamber instruments in their with rock music. A lot of them sound almost described as post-rock. The post-rock bands that add the extra instruments are the ones I like Shells using trumpet distinctly, or Murder by Death, of course, and Clan Zoo. Those two bands just feature violin pretty distinctly. So, I mean, I guess Kiss, of course, too. So I think I'm going to have to structure the entry with the extensive, more direct, and then the kind of subtle, atmospheric 1 or 2, 3 instrument types that are featured, at least to an extent. So chamber rock, that's the kind of the beauty of chamber and Baroque rock music, I guess, to an extent. It's not that classifiable, and even the emphasis on what instrument they're using. But that's why I like it. One reason why I like it. Another reason why I like it shows that members of the band actually can not only play another instrument somewhat proficiently, but also arrange it for the song. If the songs are good, you could have a trumpet or a violin or a cello or a trombone even, but if the song isn't that good, like Trombone Shorty kind of bores me. He uses obviously features trombone. So, I mean, even the Diablo Swing Orchestra, their new album, I've released, Pacificus, has, obviously, they've always featured some swing and jazz elements, so they use some horns. I guess it depends on how much I want to really say that they fit under them. But it's really ambiguous. There's some, maybe there's 10 bands that really fit that category, and then there's another 30 to 50 or 60, timbre, Brooke Wagner, that fit sort of as just an extra instrument as a piece, but isn't the primary sound. So that's kind of my diary of the month for today, and about chamber rock. And I really do have optimism about the new Typhoon album. I don't know how much more popular, much bigger, how much more. I mean, they are kind of hipster, but of course, locally in Minneapolis and St. Paul, our radio stations don't play them. I'm not even sure if Radio K's played them. I know 89.3, except they probably are trying to sponsor the concert. They're coming to the Turf Club in a few weeks. So, but yeah, I'd recommend anyone, if you're a fan of the Deer Hunter, or you're a fan of the Family Crest, or even the Polyphonic Spree, Typhoon would definitely be worth checking out, even though they're going to be classified as the indie rock, alternative rock. I mean, of course, I don't like that term. It's college rock to me. But to me, they're progressive because and this album itself is different, and so they are progressing and doing some experimentation. There's a lot of dialogue on it, but there is kind of the sound effects, and there is some dialogue kind of add to the concept that I just read about the guy who has memory loss, which, is an amnesia, but it coincides with the time frame that we're kind of in, I guess, influenced by it. And I would say that the fact that, someone has memory loss and trying to forget about the crap situation we're in with a lunatic president and someone who's a puppet spokesperson and who doesn't have any idea what he's doing, frankly. Now, maybe if that's the beauty of when things are bad, it creates great art, as opposed to when things are good, the art necessarily isn't, the inspiration isn't necessarily there for the art. Which, I'll add one more thing, and this could be a separate podcast / entry or two. I listened to Dredge's album, Catch Without Arms, again yesterday, and I need to just write something about nostalgia from the 2000s, I think, from the 2000 to 2009 or 2010, whatever, and like key albums that were around that I was into at the time. Maybe some other albums I wasn't into at the time will be included, but I think that, it's weird how that might be sort of my peak of my taste. Even though I grew up in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, I think in 2000s when progressive rock was being combined with other styles, and I found sort of a niche of what I really loved, the songwriting, those bands that popped up in that progressive college rock genre, per se, that I call it, I need to write something about that, because it gets me every time I listen to like an album from Mew from that period, or Fury Revolution, or Ocean Size, or even the Deer Hunter or the Receiving End of Sirens. A lot of those albums from that period, especially. I don't know if it was a special time. Maybe I'm just trying to be nostalgic. The 2010s, I have it, like Pepe Deluxe and some of these albums that I look back on and listen to still love. But I think the 2000s, I had more of it, and it really gets to me. It almost brings me to tears sometimes, just because I almost long to go back in time and discover that album for the first time, or just go back in time and just remember when it was new. Remember when it was it sounded like the best thing since sliced bread. So, I mean, I have nostalgia for the 90s too, of course, but I think the 2000s are my strongest. Maybe in the 2020s I'll be having heavy nostalgia for the 2010s. Maybe not. We'll see. But anyway, that's enough for now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please leave a comment. If you are into any chamber rock, Baroque rock bands, who are your favorites? Or, just list any type of hopes and albums that are coming out you're looking forward to that you already heard from 2018 or the end of 2017. And we'll see you next time.